Welcome to another episode of Close Mode, the Enterprise Sales Show. I'm Brian Dietmeyer, CEO of Close Strong. And today I'm super lucky to be with Phil Epifano, who's the Director of Sales at OpenSpace. And OpenSpace is a pretty cool company. It's reality capture and AI-powered analytics for builders, like all the way through the construction phase. And it's sort of cool. Phil was telling me about, walking around with this cam on. There it is. It kind of records everything. So, Phil, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Brian. Really happy to be here. And as mentioned, first time caller, long time listener, and enjoy a lot of your podcasts and happy to be here and contribute to, the sales cause and helping to improve.
Thank you. So last week we were talking about this sort of dichotomy about the need to install more structure and parameters into the sales process, which, by the way, is a massive problem for a lot of people I talk to. It's like we rolled this thing out and I'm not getting anyone to adopt. So there's that. And then you also spoke a little bit about the need for sort of dynamic shifts that don't always apply to everybody. So my first question for you is, what's your high level perspective on installing process and cadence, and at the same time allowing for the fact that one size doesn't fit all?
Yeah, no, great question. And that's where I'm very methodical, like systematic with my approach. And if there isn't a level of structure or quality with that, like I can't function. My processes go awry. And that's where, from my times as either ISR, AE, and now management, that's always applied. Like always having a systematic approach day in, day out, each week, each month, each quarter, so that I can find plays that are repeatable, right? And that's where, some people in organizations, whether they're new to the company from a management perspective, or just building up the team, that's where sometimes we just kind of by default go to some of the easier kind of basic type of level of structure. And then you get into that kind of realm of just, if it's not broke, it's, don't fix it. Right. And
Yeah.
But in reality, it might be broken. There might be some kinks and you're not getting that feedback from AEs, from other sales managers. And so what I really like to do is really dissect at each stage of a sale, each stage within the company, ISR, AE, management, see what actually is broken. And it's obviously a heavier lift. And that's why people tend to be reluctant to diving in, analyzing, like, is this working for our company? Because, AEs, sales managers will obviously work at multiple various companies and see different structure. And that's where, one size doesn't fit all. Like it doesn't apply to whether it's your industry, whether it's your enterprise sales, SaaS, it has to be relatively custom to what you're providing, what solution you're actually selling. And so that's where you really want to understand that. And I think that definitely takes a certain level of maturity from the sales management, the executives, of being like, we need to see how we can actually improve and do better. We need to understand, the ease of use for an AE, for an ISR of what does that look like, right? And so we just assume like ISR are very basic, like they're just grinding, calling all day, but like there are better ways to promote your company, to prospect, to do the cold outreach. So not just, assuming like just call all day and that should be getting the job done. Same for AEs. I am very analytical from all AEs. All AEs should still be prospecting, cold calling. Like all the successful AEs continue to do it. So I want to see what that looks like, to demoing, to closing the deal, to account management, and make sure that it's a completely seamless process from start to end, and make sure that we can actually repeat it. You might find a perfect model that works for a couple deals and here and there and stuff like that, but that's where not only just with the structure that you implement, you want to make sure that it's repeatable as well, right? Because you might find, again, like some structure that works for some deals, but you still have to remain somewhat nimble with each of your client objections, hurdles, different unique structure within the people that you're selling to as well. But establish that main base structure, right? And specific to your company, to your industry, and making sure that it can apply throughout the entire company. So again, heavier uplift work, and reasons why, again, people are reluctant to kind of diving in, getting into the weeds. And that's where I like being on the front line with my AEs, with even the ISRs, and making sure that they're happy, they're functional, and they're being effective with each of their days as they come to clock in.
It's interesting you mentioned, and I've seen this a lot, quite frankly. It's like, especially for successful sales leaders that might be on their second or third gig. It's like, this is what I did before. And I remember, and Dan, our producer, hears me quote Bill Marriott a lot. I was lucky enough to work for Marriott Hotels, and he often said the same things that lead to your success will lead to your failure going forward. And so I think about that when you say, hey, this is what I did here. Let me just transfer all that stuff over. That doesn't necessarily work. But then there's that heavy lift you talk about, right? And people are avoiding that heavy lift. Is that kind of the idea?
Oh yeah, because it's hanging in the back of their mind of like what their current issues are, and like where could we? It's not that big of an issue, so we don't need to restructure or anything like that. So we could just put that on pause.
Right.
But before you know it, those problems tend to just continue to grow, if not get bigger, and really start to impact, you know, your actual revenue, your effectiveness, or growing or beating competition. And that's where, like, coming from now 9 years in the startup world, where you're kind of, building the brick road, and establishing new policies, new structure, and seeing what works, and having to pivot to a new structure. It's very appealing for a lot of companies to model after some of these larger corporate conglomerates that are just like, yeah, hey, it's not broke, like, don't fix it.
Yeah.
It worked very well here for 5,000 employees for my 100-person sales team, but that doesn't necessarily translate to every organization. And again, like, you have to kind of take a step back of understanding your industry, understanding the core structure of your company, and where you need to make some necessary adjustments.
Yeah, you mentioned something else that about ease of use, and I've seen and have been invited to help with a lot of sales process and sales stages and gating and evidence, and that all came to mind when you, and I feel like people miss that a lot. Like, okay, sure, this is like crazy detailed, but is this executable by the front line without having a part-time job doing it?
Yeah, that's a great point. From a sales manager perspective, it's very easy for us to assume everybody's happy. Hey, they're still closing deals. There's no pain points, there's no kinks in, their daily process. But until you actually start asking, or actually on the front line, or going through, the process of closing a deal, of working through to it, to a, account management structure, or stage, you don't really know. Like, you're only seeing the close one deals come in, but could you actually do better?
Yeah,
Right. So, you know, that's where, again, having the experience from ISR, AE to sales manager now, it's, really helped me just manage more effectively, knowing what the typical pain points are from an ISR, AE, and then seeing from a management perspective of like, well, how can I make your life easier? How can I actually accelerate the volume that you're bringing into the company? And again, a lot of sales managers, based on their prior experience, or what's worked in the past, will assume like, well, this team will definitely like what I did at companies ABS,
right.
right? So I'm going to apply it here because my teams were crushing it, we were fine. But then it's like you start, and that's what's necessary, of like really having consistent one-on-ones, and having with your AEs, and having that open form dialogue for the first 5-10 minutes. Like, how's everything going? Like what pain points, how can you actually do better? Like, what can I
Yeah.
do to make you better at your job? So making sure you kind of have that open dialogue with your team,
Yep.
digesting it. Don't make any knee-jerk reactions like, ooh, like one person said this, like I got to change this immediately. That's going to get you into trouble as well. Do your research, just as much as our AEs or ISRs are doing research on who we can go after. You have to do it from a management perspective internally, and do it continuously. You can't just do it at the beginning of the year and then roll it out. It's got to be a monthly, quarterly practice.
Yeah, it's funny. We spoke about that last time we talked, which is about sort of a completely democratic and open, where kind of everything's voted on, and then balancing that. So, and touch on your view on that a little bit, because we have to listen. But it sounded like you felt like, hey, you can take that too far as well.
Yeah, and I think I learned that, the hard way a couple times of just, on the team call and letting 15, 20 people just beat me up. Like, all right, everybody, like, let me have it. Like, give me the pain points. What's frustrating you? And it just wasn't productive. And it wasn't healthy for the team as well, right? Because you'll have maybe some people that have some negative point of views that like are relevant or that aren't connected to like what we're trying to solve for. And so I am still very much open forum, like it very much encourage, like give me your feedback, be as transparent as possible, get all the cards out on the table. Because if I don't know, I can't help you, right? And so I'm selective with first um, you know, what do I want to bring to a wider audience, right? I'm not going to be like, hey, like, how does everybody feel about their commission? Like, you want to bump and stuff like that would just completely. So I'm selective about like, hey, how's the like cold outreach, or how's it working with your BDR, SDR, or how's it working with your solution engineer? Right? Is everything pretty seamless? You guys are on the same page, or is there some disconnect? So trying to get that feedback. If it is a little bit, more sensitive of a topic, I'll probably have some sidebar conversations with kind of the leaders in my group with AEs that I can not only rely on for like honest opinions and feedback. Um, and then as I gather that from a select few, then I could then release it and get more wider feedback if needed. Sometimes you can rely on a select few within your team to be able to, get some of that assistance of just like, hey, what's the temperature of the water on this topic with like you and the rest of the AEs,
Yeah.
right? But again, like still very much open to like certain aspects, like, hey, what do you guys want for like spiffs, or like, what about this type of new structure, and I will allow for that, and then again, I'll dissect it a little bit to see where, like, hey, that was a great suggestion, that was a great pointer. Like, I'm going to actually digest this, and then depending on the topic, escalate it up to other management and see like, hey, like, is this something that we could possibly look into? So that is something that my AEs have definitely been able to rely on me, is that I'm not going to take your information, send it into a folder and never speak it of again. You have to be a manager that, they can take your word for it. Like if you're going to take their feedback and it's a major issue, you got to be willing and also just informed of what's currently happening. And then when you bring it to the management, make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row. Because if you keep relaying all this, mindless banter or like things that are irrelevant to the structure of the business, then it's like, boy cry wolf, just like, man, like we're getting a lot of complaints from Phil's team, and
Right.
it's just not, it's not helpful for anybody's time. It's not impacting the structure. It's just a lot of noise that's just distracting everybody. So I like to really condense all of that and make sure I'm strategic with escalating any of those items.
So I wonder, related but changing course a little bit, something that's really troubling for so many leaders that I talk to. It's like installing a sales process or a sales methodology or some kind of cadence, um, like getting that adopted. Right? There's mandating it, and then there's kind of earning it and getting people to start adopting. What's your perspective on? Okay, so we got everyone's feedback, and we're going to make these changes. Now we got to roll this stuff out and get it adopted. How do we get cadence and methodology and process adopted,
Mhm.
short of making it a condition of employment?
Yeah. No, and more the reason why people are reluctant to even jumping into these types of issues or pieces of structure that need work. Not only first you have to do the analysis and research and go inside and out of the company of what's the core issue, where is it stemming from, what needs to be fixed. But then when it comes like sometimes even like the more difficult or harder work, which is then finding a fix for that and then rolling it out, right? So you want to make sure that you're checking all your boxes from sales operations to deal flow process to finance, that any of these changes that you're making, even from like a CRM change, like something in Salesforce that you're going to adjust to have better visibility into all the AE's activities or something like that. You want to make sure that any of these changes that you will implement doesn't have a ripple effect, that you make this change and one department just completely goes haywire from the result. So you got to do your homework first of what department it's actually touching, build out a completely informed, like, uh, concise document workflows, guidelines, parameters, and even sometimes what I like to do for rolling out new processes or structures is, why are we doing this, right? Because AEs will be like, I'm so busy. You just added
Yes.
so much to my plate. I'm already so busy with prospecting, demos, closing deals, management accounts. Now you want to add this, and so I'll have a very thorough list of where this is actually helping. Actually, if you roll this out correctly, it's actually going to alleviate some of those daily, weekly burdens. Right. So once you have that completely formalized and ready to launch, depending on the size of the project and what we're trying to accomplish, I will test it out with a couple AEs just to feel it out. People that I can rely on, know that will test it out immediately, give me honest feedback. Once I have that with, maybe two or three AEs, then it's like, yep, talk to management. They were able to effectively roll this out. I've already seen the impact that it's had on their daily, weekly structure. We can now explore something wider. And I actually did kind of create similar type of structure, even just for like exit criteria, right? Like, what do you need to have to understand like where your deal stands? What are outstanding items? Something very like basic, simplistic, one page, and it immediately held some impact, and we were able to roll it out on a wider basis. But be strategic, mindful for when you are doing this. Make sure that you have the right team in place during the early stages of thinking about this, getting feedback, and making sure that ultimately you're not creating more work, right? That typically rolling out these new processes, you're trying to solve for something. So make sure
Yeah.
that's still the end goal, and you're able to accomplish it. So back to like the root of the question, like, how do we continue like making sure that it's effectively rolled out and actually done properly on a consistent basis? Sales managers, again, being reluctant to doing these types of things, it takes a while. It might take, depending on the level of change, it might be 2 weeks where, yep, 100% of AEs already rolled it out. We're seeing the impact. Excellent. That's part of the structure. We're stamping it into concrete, and that's it. Other ones that might be a little bit more extensive, a little bit more technical, it could easily take 3, 4, maybe even an entire quarter to see the overall impact and to see it fully rolled out successfully. So you have to be patient with it. And whether it's bringing it up on your Monday team call, like, hey, everybody, remember the new account management structure we just rolled out? Like something I literally just did this quarter. I'm in the second month and still having to remind people, bringing it up on the team call, bringing it up on our one-on-ones. How is this going? Give me some feedback. If you continue getting positive feedback within each, it should be an easy piece of structure to implement. But again,
Yeah.
like, there's a lot of steps that you can't make these changes overnight, and you really have to go, again, do your homework first before you even explore it. But it does take sometimes beating a dead horse of just getting it getting it actually in place. Because again, like, a lot of AEs, even the really good ones and successful ones, will be like, hey, it's not broke. I'm not going to fix it. I'm hitting my numbers. But it's like, but you could actually be doing better,
Yeah.
right? And let me show you this. And that's going to be a challenge sometimes with AEs that have been doing sales for 10, 15, 20, 30 years that have been, relatively successful. It's like, I'm looking from outside in, you could be better.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too. I love the idea about one, of course, building the WIFM, which I'm not sure, what's in it for the rep. Oftentimes there's a lot in it for management, right? This thing that we're rolling out. And I also love the idea of testing, right? Say, oh, I hadn't, thought or heard about that. Let's not roll it out to everybody. Let's test this thing, and then let's have their feedback about what's working. I just saw some research that reps said agreed at the 70% level. I do not want to fill out any more blank forms, whether it's a CRM or some selling methodology. Like, I
Yeah.
don't see a with him for me, and it's funny too. And I don't know if they're being sarcastic, but at the 90% level, they said I'd actually take a cut in compensation if I didn't have to fill out blank forms anymore. And but that, yeah, it's like I feel like there's so much of that, right? It's being rolled out, and I do see like a lot of stuff rolls up for forecasting and helps the company, but yeah, what's that with them for the rep? Let's test it,
Yeah.
adjust it, and make sure they're getting something out of it.
Yeah. The small isolated test was something um, our VP suggested, and it's worked very well in multiple cases. Again, for some of the more painful type changes that like might have to be rolled out, or some of like the exciting changes that we'll give select few the opportunity to test it out, see the potential success. Um, because again, like, and we've learned, I've learned from multiple companies that I've been with that like you make some of these knee jerk changes or reactions to, wow, this is like a continuous problem, like we got to pivot immediately, and if you don't get that feedback or understand exactly what the root cause of it is, and you make those changes without coordinating or having conversations with other departments or even just the AEs or ISRs, it could explode. And then not only do you just have a failed attempt of rolling out new structure that was ultimately there to help the company, but now you're actually taking several steps backwards, right? Because now you just impacted the morale of the sales team. Man, we keep getting stuff thrown on us. Then they're questioning like some of the like structure, like why would we do this, and not having that background of like what it's there
Yeah,
for, what we're trying to accomplish is absolutely critical for being able to do that and have success. So yeah, really, again, like a lot of people are reluctant to it just because of just the level and amount of work that it does require. Um,
I wonder, it, and maybe this is obvious, but when we run these tests, if something's not working or there's an easier, better way to do it, I mean, to build trust with the team, we've got to say, okay, the test actually didn't work, because it's one thing to come back and report on, hey, it's working, but I imagine that's a critical part of it is saying, okay, we tested it with four of your peers, this didn't work, we've made this changes, now let's do it.
Yeah, and we've had that as well, where it's like we tried something new, and again, to your point, and it is true that some of these changes are, at times for the benefit of managers, the execs, depending on some of the companies, maybe even like some of your board seats that want to see this level of structure and stuff like that, and so you got to make sure that you can easily show the benefits that it's going to have for the AEs, ISR, and other surrounding teams. But that's where, if you don't do enough homework, like, yeah, to your point, it could really, jeopardize not only the morale on the team, but like sometimes the trust, as you mentioned. And
Yeah,
so you want to make sure that they can trust you for leading the team, leading the company, doing it effectively, simultaneously keeping everybody happy and that morale up. That's a big challenge that a lot of companies go through, right? They might have an incredibly successful sales team and they're crushing it and hitting their numbers, but everybody hates their job. They just, clock in and it's just painful and just waiting for 5 o'clock. And, you'll have high turnover, right? Like you might be able to produce, but you're not going to have, those quality folks on your team for long.
yeah, it's such a great point. The kind of care and feeding part, right? Versus just looking at the lagging indicators, and you might be killing people. And yeah, I mean, as I kind of sum up what we've been chatting about, and again, I hear this a lot. Reps are busy as hell. There are very few of them that are just taking it easy. Everybody wants to make their number, so it's that balance of what are we rolling out to them that has benefit for them, not just for the board or for the management team, but benefits for them. And I know it's a thing a lot of people struggle with. So I appreciate this chat today because it's being a lot more thoughtful about what's going out, how it's going out, right, and that sort of
Mhm.
thing. So thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that was something I struggled with, like work-life balance. It was just sales never sleeps, and it was just like I day in day out working weekends, at night on calls at times, and that's where, that's just not sustainable. And so you want to make it, have a sales organization that can still execute within a reasonable time frame, be able to get their job done, be effective with that, and that's And it really revolves around just the overall structure that you establish, maintain, and remain consistent, right? The most difficult thing for a successful AE is remaining consistent, right? The ones that are just continuously hitting their numbers or excelling, the ones that are dipping just need some level of improvement or, some structure established. Same thing for the sales org as a whole, right? It's easy to have one big blow up quarter, but can you do that again? And how are you going to do it again, right? So if you don't have that structure in place and it's just shooting from the hip each quarter, you're going to see some significant dips and be like, why did that
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah.
And it's usually, the attention comes down on me and other sales managers. Like, how did we get to the third month in the quarter and just not know that we were going to come, fall this short? So, and that's where, I have, my structure in place each week, month, quarter to make sure that I don't have any of those types of surprises come.
Yep. No, I really appreciate the conversation. I think a lot of us can benefit from installing structure in a way that works with the sales team and helps them. So yeah, I'll be looking forward to people's comments, and I want to do more of this on our podcast. Is invite people to say, hey, what are you what are you doing? Those of you who listen to it, and how are you embedding process and focusing on the care and feeding of the reps? So I really appreciate your time. You've been generous with your time and your ideas, and I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, well, Brian, I couldn't be more thankful for the time as well, and always here to help other fellow sales folks, sales managers, and yeah, really appreciate the conversation.
Okay. Thank you, Phil.